Mesoamerican and ancient American legends called the star being legends of star beings coming from the sky to find, now this is in ancient times, to find in a tribe a woman who was barren, who had no children or had no husband and no other children to take care of, and she would be made pregnant. And the beings would tell the village, let the village know, she's pregnant now, she's going to have an unusual child, you are all tasked with raising that child so she could focus on it, and then we'll come get it at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. Now this background and story was told to me by a woman named Paula Gunn Allen, Dr. Paula Gunn Allen, who was a professor emeritus from UCLA, who was a Native American herself and had done a lot of research in this field. She was a sociology professor, I believe. And she contacted me early on and told me this whole story. And she said, I think your star child is in fact one of those star beings that somehow didn't get picked up. That's what I think. And it made sense to me, so I bought into it. The star being legends go back for hundreds of years, hundreds of years. I don't know thousands of years, but certainly hundreds of years. Enough to where they come down verbally within the tribes and the elders who she would communicate with about it, and not just in North America, but in South America as well. So very, very interesting stuff, the whole star being legend thing. So it made sense to us that it would be a mother and a child. But later we found out that it wasn't a child, but for a long time we did believe it was a child because of the teeth and the teeth situation. And then later, somebody noticed that the teeth were fairly worn for a child. And then later when the Canadians pulled the root out, that root was awful big, but we still went with the idea of mother-child up until that 2003 DNA test proved beyond a shadow of a doubt they were not genetically related. So whatever their relationship was, whether it was caretaker, whether it was lover, whether it was wife, we don't know. There's no way to know. But there was obviously a strong emotional link between them because she was willing to die in the way that she did. So we just have to take that on faith and wait for some kind of clarification if we can ever get one about what their relationship might have been. Certainly not mother and child. So now we're at the point where we have a mitochondrial recovery for both, and the star child has a human mother, and the recoveries are very easy. The DNA is good, fresh, clean, not going to have a problem here. So they do the nuclear DNA for the human. Again, first attempt, just like with the Canadian lab, no problem, recovery, human, nothing unusual about it. Now it's time for the first attempt at the recovery of the star child's nuclear DNA. And they informed me that we've got the human, both its mitochondrial and its nuclear have been easy to recover. We're not looking at a degraded specimen here. It's going to be a good result. And since we've got a human mother, you pretty much have to expect it's going to have a human father, and you need to prepare yourself for that answer. And I said, I don't care. I just want this over with. At that point, it had been 4 years out of my life, 4 years off the track of my other career in human origins and hominoids, and I was anxious to get back to it. All along the way of these 12 years, I've been anxious to get this over with and move back to that other persona that I would prefer to be. So anyway, we were at the point of doing the star child's nuclear DNA. They ran the first test, no result. Second test, no result. Third test, no result. 6 tests they ran to be sure, no result. It was clear at that point that the father was somehow preventing those keys from attaching, those primer keys from going in and finding the lock. The mother's there. We know the mother, the 23 chromosomes of the mother are there. If the star child had a human father, a normal human father, those keys would have gone in and hooked up, and that would have been it. It would have been over right then, and that would have been fine. It would have been the truth. We could all have said, well, that's the truth. That's what it is. These 25 physical deformities, it's 1 in a 20 billion or whatever, but there it is. It's a human, and that would have been it. So after these 6 attempts, they were able to say conclusively, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the technology of the day, 203, could not recover the star child's nuclear DNA. Now, what did that mean? It meant that the technology of 2003 could not do it, so it for sure couldn't do it in 99. So what they had proved in 2003 was that the test in 1999 was absolutely invalid. Just more contamination or manipulation of results, or whatever you want to call it. The result from 99 was wrong. But Novella and all other scientists, all other skeptics, have totally ignored the 2003 test, which was much more valid, carried out in an ancient DNA lab by qualified ancient DNA geneticists versus a forensic lab carried out by students who are not really qualified to do it. They choose to this day believe and support the first test over the second test. Because why? It gives them the answer they want. It gives mainstream science and critics and skeptics the answer they want, which is that this is just a human male, and that's it. When in fact it was proven wrong in 2003, and if they had had any kind of decency or pride or whatever in their work and their profession, they would have been willing to say, okay, we made a mistake and it's obvious that the new result is correct. But that's not what they want to hear, so they just pretend it didn't happen. But it did happen. And the report is there for anybody on the Star Child Project website to read. You know, it's clear that it's there. And later, I should add as a sidebar, in 2006, I asked Novella to change the article, pull the article, update the article, do anything to it, because it was filled with wrong information now. And he wrote me back and he said the article will stand as written. And the only change that he made was to change the copyright date from 1999 to 2006 so that this flawed report of his would seem more current. And to this day, it's still used as the basis of the Wikipedia, which I call Wackipedia, the Wackipedia report on me and the Star Child. So on my websites, the starchildproject.com and lloydpye.com, you can read the truth. You can read every line of the Wikipedia articles about me and about the Star Child on those two different websites. And under each line and each sentence and each phrase, I tell the truth for anybody that wants to see it. And same thing with the Novella article. It's there, line for line, word for word, and I tell you what he says and then what the truth is. But again, people don't understand how science manipulates the truth to make things be what they want it to be, and that they have no regard for the actual truth itself. They've propagandized us all to believe that that's what they do, but it isn't what they do. They try to protect themselves. They try to protect the status quo. They don't like change. They don't like big change, and that's what something like this represents. So, without a recovery of the nuclear DNA of the Star Child, where did that leave us? What were we able to say? Well, we were able to know that the father wasn't human. Now, all the geneticists could say, and all science would accept, was that they couldn't recover it. In 6 attempts, they couldn't recover it, which they had to say meant there was some kind of exotic degradation in the Star Child, not in the human, but in the Star Child, that allowed its mitochondrial DNA to be easily recovered, but its nuclear DNA not. Some exotic degradation that nobody had ever seen before, you know, that caused it to not recover. But what it really meant was that the father wasn't entirely human. Now the question was, how far away from human was he? Was it a hair-breadth difference, or was it a significant difference? That's what technology did not allow them to say in 2003. Primers were either they connected or they didn't. They didn't say how much they were missing. Could have been anything. So I said to Ripon and Jason, well, what can we do here? What recourse do we have? And they said, your DNA is in here. We don't have any doubt of that. But technology is not able to tell you what you need to know, which is it has to recover the whole genome and then be able to compare that to the human genome. But there is technology underway right now, we know it's being worked on, to recover a whole genome base pair by base pair. And that they say that technology will be online in 3 to 5 years. Now, I had already done 4 really hard years getting to that point. And now they're saying I've got to do 3 to 5 more years in this kind of limbo where I can't prove what the star child is. But now at least I have something to argue about the 99 test. So it puts the star child back on the map of alternative knowledge, but it doesn't do anything in the mainstream world. There's just no response at all there. So I slowly get to build its credibility back up in the world of alternative knowledge over the next 3 years. So in July of 2006, which was 3 years to the month of when I was getting the results of this, 3 years later exactly, a company called 454 Life Sciences in Branford, Connecticut announced that the technology that Jason and Ripon had told me about that would be available in 3 to 5 years was indeed available. They had a machine now that could sequence all the base pairs in a genome, in an unknown genome. So instead of having to find what it was with sequences of base pairs a few thousand long, they could do it right down to the base pairs, to the most fundamental building blocks of life, and they could recover the whole thing. This was what we needed because the star child was an unknown genome. It was, part of it was known, part of it was human, obviously. We didn't know what part, but the other part wasn't. So it was going to have to be broken apart in those unknown segments had to be found as clearly as the known segments were. And by then, you know, humans, the human genome had been sequenced, the chimp genome had been sequenced, and so we knew how to recover unknown parts. So it was exactly what we needed to recover the star child genome. The problem was in 2006, it was brand new technology and it was horribly expensive. Multi-millions to do one genome, and they started immediately on the Neanderthal because that's something science wants an answer for. They don't want an answer for this. They would hope that this would go away and never bother them. But so I had to wait, again, continuing to wait. 206, 207, 208, 209, waiting for the price to come down within range for us to do. Well, by 209, it was about within $500,000 to $250,000, depending on how degraded it was. And this is what they told me at 454. Depending on the level of degradation, it can be $250,000, it can be $500,000, we don't know. So when I was trying to get that money, people that I would talk to about it would say, well, can you guarantee that we will get the recovery of this nuclear DNA that they couldn't get in 203? And I would say, yeah, I think we can, but I can't give you a life and death guarantee, but I think it will be worth it no matter what. I think it'll be a great mystery solved if we can recover it. Couldn't convince anybody to spring for that amount of money without the guarantee that the nuclear DNA was there and was viable. That was what was required. So early this year, finally, early part of 2010 in January, a geneticist, a top geneticist in the U.S. contacted me and said, when I first heard about you, I thought it was, a little flaky, but my wife, a friend of my wife, convinced her to take a look at you. She took a look at everything you've produced, and she's convinced, and then she convinced me to take a look, and now I've taken a look, and I'm convinced. I think you might have something here. And I am willing to, if you will give me a sample, I will use a refined shotgunning technique that will recover nuclear DNA down to the base pair level of 200, 300, 400, 500 base pairs long. And if it's there and if it's viable, I can tell you if it's there. And if I recover anything, I can run it through the NIH database and tell you a little something about it. And I was beside myself. I was so happy. I'm always willing to just push all those chips out to the middle of the table and let it roll because, again, I want it over. I just want a true answer, a real answer we can all believe in. Get it over with, get the millstone from around my neck, and let me go back to who I used to be.